He knew what Hitler did. A document reveals a secret about the Vatican's Pope. During World War II, a recently revealed document from the Vatican archives shows that Pope Pius XII, the head of the Catholic Church during World War II, was aware that thousands of Jews were being killed in gas chambers in occupied Poland. This undermines previous Vatican arguments justifying the Pope's silence on the Holocaust during the war, according to the Washington Post. This document was a German letter sent by a German Jesuit member of the anti-Nazi resistance, Father Lothar König, addressed to Pope Pius XII's close personal secretary, Father Robert Leiber. In the letter dated December 14, 1942, König wrote that up to 6,000 people, especially Poles and Jews, were dying daily in the ovens of the Nazi-operated Bełżec extermination camp in then-occupied Poland. The Italian newspaper, Corriere Della Sera, reported on this letter, which was discovered by Vatican archivist Giovanni Coco. Coco described it as further evidence in a flood of clear and detailed reports about Nazi crimes that were in full view of the Holy See. The Vatican Secret Archives. It is worth noting that after decades of pressure from Jewish organizations and historians, the Vatican opened its secret archives in 2020 relating to the Pope during the war, who led the Catholic Church from 1939 to 1958. Since then, Pope Pius XII has become one of the most controversial popes due to his failure to publicly condemn Nazism during the war. Critics even referred to him as the Pope of Hitler. However, others, including the Vatican, argued that his diplomacy partially saved lives by preventing a violent Nazi backlash. Between March and December 1942, approximately 450,000 Jews, the majority of them from Poland, were killed at the Bełżec extermination camp, according to the Bełżec Museum and Memorial Site. In the years following Pope Pius XII's tenure, critics have highlighted his actions, or alleged inaction, during the war. Holocaust survivors have also pushed to halt the process of his canonization. The Church did not fear history. When millions of pages from Pope Pius XII's archives were opened in 2020, Pope Francis stated that the Church was not afraid of history and that Pius XII's papacy faced moments of extreme difficulty and agonizing decisions of human and Christian wisdom, which might appear to some as reserved. This was reported by the American television network PBS. In his 2022 book, The Pope at War, historian and anthropologist David Kurtzer argued that Pope Pius XII prioritized the Catholic Church over moral leadership, fearing that hostility toward Hitler might lead to a rupture between the Church and the country. Pope Pius XII also initially believed that he could negotiate with Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler and mitigate Nazi hatred through diplomacy, according to the author. While the Pope acted cautiously amid early fears that the Axis powers might ultimately dominate Europe, Pius XII did not change his approach even as evidence emerged, and pleas were made for the Vatican to take a stand. The historian wrote, "As a moral leader, Pius XII must be judged for his failure." Pius XII and World War II. Pius XII's actions during World War II remain a subject of intense debate among historians. While he made public statements calling for peace and expressing concern for the victims of the war, critics argue that he failed to explicitly condemn the Nazis and their systematic extermination of Jews. Efforts at diplomacy. Pius XII believed in the power of diplomacy and neutrality as a means of navigating the war. He sought to maintain the Vatican's position as a mediator and avoid actions that could provoke Nazi retaliation against Catholics or the Vatican itself. Some historians suggest that this cautious approach allowed the Church to provide covert assistance to persecuted individuals, including Jews, through clandestine networks and Vatican shelters. The Holocaust and the silence of Pius XII. One of the most contentious aspects of Pius XII's papacy is his response to the Holocaust. Documents from the Vatican archives, opened in 2020, reveal that the Pope received detailed reports about the mass killings of Jews, including the use of gas chambers in Nazi extermination camps. Despite this knowledge, Pius XII refrained from issuing a direct condemnation of the Holocaust. Critics argue that his silence emboldened the Nazis and failed to provide moral leadership during a time of immense suffering. Some Holocaust survivors and Jewish organizations have labeled him as Hitler's Pope, a term that underscores the depth of their criticism. Conversely, defenders of Pius XII assert that his diplomatic efforts and covert actions helped save thousands of lives, claiming that a more vocal stance might have led to greater Nazi reprisals. Post-war legacy. After the war, Pius XII played a role in addressing Europe's humanitarian crisis and rebuilding efforts. He opposed communism vehemently, seeing it as a significant threat to the Church and Western values. During the Cold War, his papacy emphasized anti-communist policies and the promotion of Catholic social teaching. Controversy over canonization. The question of Pius XII's sainthood has sparked heated debates. Supporters highlight his spiritual devotion, diplomatic skill, and quiet efforts to save lives during the Holocaust. Opponents, however, argue that his moral failings during the war make him unworthy of canonization. Efforts to beatify him have been met with resistance, particularly from Jewish groups and historians who continue to call for a fuller examination of his wartime actions. The death of Pope Pius XII. Pope Pius XII died on October 9, 1958, in Castel Gandolfo, the papal summer residence near Rome. He was 82 years old at the time, having spent nearly 19 years at the head of the Catholic Church, a period marked by significant challenges from World War II to the beginning of the Cold War. A formal funeral ceremony was held at St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, attended by a large number of religious and political figures from around the world. Pope Pius XII was buried in the crypt of St. Peter's Basilica, where popes are traditionally laid to rest. His legacy after death. After his death, the legacy of Pope Pius XII continued to be debated, especially regarding his role during the Holocaust and his silence regarding Nazi crimes. With the opening of the Vatican archives in 2020, discussions about his leadership were revived, adding further complexity to the understanding of his personality and historical role. Nonetheless, Pope Pius XII remains a central figure in the history of the Catholic Church, as his papacy represented a period filled with challenges that contributed to shaping Vatican policies in the 20th century.
Dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesem Jahr für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit